drumming was really your thing,
Yeah.
and then you came out here as a musician, really,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what happened the first time you went to Los Angeles?
Well, a drummer teacher in New York City said to me, after I had expressed an interest in coming to California, he's like, yeah, baby, if you're going to go to California, go to San Francisco. LA sucks. He's like, go to San Francisco, make a name for yourself, then come back to New York, you know. And, you know, his name was Michael Carvin, and he's a pretty big deal. And I was just like, okay, Michael, yes.
Yes.
And I did go home that day.
Yes,
and I was
teacher.
like, yeah. And was saying to my dad, I'm going to LA, and did. So I came out here and got a job the first day. I went looking for a job. Still, in fact, still had all my drums and everything packed in my car. And got a job. The guy was like, go home, get changed, come to work tonight as a waiter. I was like, great. I was on the 10 freeway.
And you had a place to stay, right?
I was staying with a friend who I'd
Very cool.
known from Rutgers, and was going back to his place. I hear this terrific sound in my rear view, look up just in enough time to see a UPS truck barreling toward my car. An 18-wheeler had hit a UPS truck, which hit my car. Drums totaled. But anyway, it set off this chain reaction.
You were lucky to walk away from that.
I was.
Oh, my God.
But it set off a chain reaction of events which got me up to San Francisco, you know.
Right.
So the teacher was right.
So your first move to L.A. culminates 2 days later in this mega car crash.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've had sort of a love-hate relationship with L.A. These days it's mostly love, and it's kind of been that way for a while. But in the beginning, it was rather tumultuous. And it's, I think it's interesting that some of the pieces that I write that most resonate with me, the ones that resonate the most are ones that I've actually written about L.A., and that mean the most to me. So I find that kind of funny, especially after having gone through a period where it's just like, I hate this place so much.
Wow.
Soundtrack to a modern-day L.A. poem noir. Sounds of Hollywoodland thrills and chills set in ultra-moody hues of 1940s, 50s gangster L.A. Brass-knuckle fast talk of hard-boiled thugs and detectives, kiss-me deadly melodies of femme fatales, bar brawls, catcalls, the cold click of stiletto heels, stiletto blades, and more cooler doors closing on still another John Doe. Those sounds mixed with present-day sounds, riotous rhythms forged from hands of Leimert Park djembe demigods breakbeating on wings of rap and revolution, car horns, car radios, car alarms. Freeways clogged with huddled and befuddled masses inching towards invention, reinvention, prosperity, invisibility. The bark and bite of bulldogs and bulldog revolvers, our past and present city sounds, combining and recombining to create the soundtrack to a modern-day L.A. poem noir. A white heat double indemnity song of live and die set deep in the blood, pulsing through the hearts and minds of one and all. Century City lawyers to San Pedro dock workers, West Side yoga warriors to Skid Row worriers, drug addicts to the clean and sober, clergy members to tattooed rock gods, those on their deathbeds and those suffering from fevered dreams of almighty stardom. Our soundtrack to a modern-day L.A. poem noir. Packs the hot and howling will of Santa Ana winds, earworms its way into our soul jukeboxes with our inner demons, seeks alleyways as if they're confessionals in which to share sins, its mirrors and reflections, rain and complex plot lines, fingernails dragging across our blackboard jungle brains as that voice in our head proclaims, yeah, I've been beaten up, but I'm not beaten, and I'm not quitting. Our soundtrack to a modern-day L.A. poem noir is stained with a history of its notorious crimes and criminals, from the Black Dahlia to Sharon Tate, the Hillside Strangler to the Grim Sleeper. It's a hymn filled with hums of late-night neon signs and the short vowel sound of death's last sigh on a victim's lips, ohms and bad omens, sirens and babies crying, police helicopters circling, buzzing like hornets out for a sudden sting. One must develop an ear for our city song, harmonize slow and steady at first, then cruise into the fast lane, dodge multi-car pileups of those who burned out before burning bright, anxious leaps of faith that only a precious few have survived. Our soundtrack to a modern-day LA poem noir, a lurid and lethal hunger fueled by gasoline, sweat, and tears, decked out in false eyelashes and false promises. It's a true love and true crime booty call wooing with stroked and stoked hallelujahs, purring like sex kittens, knitting kisses out of thin air. Moving, grooving, coaxing, cajoling, ready to find us innocent or guilty beneath midnight streetlights shining like halos and interrogation lights, our soundtrack to a modern-day LA poem noir. It's a death song in the key of cordite heard by Sam Cooke when taking a bullet at the Hacienda Hotel. It's a non-stop party song wailed by Tom Waits, Iggy Pop, and Janis Joplin at the Tropicana in the low-rent, high-spirited late 60s. Songbirds sit on phone lines mimicking our city's rev and dread soundtrack. Earthquakes only visit us 'cause they want to learn how to shake, rattle, and roll like we do. From Olvera Street to Rodeo Drive, Watts Tower to the Miracle Mile, generations of races and ethnicities, occupations and preoccupations adding to our city song. From labor movements battling 1920s union busters to 50s and 60s Chavez Ravine families facing down bulldozers and eviction notices. From African Americans chased out of 1930s sundown towns to the later cries of Rodney King when suffering the blows and bruises of racism-wielding police. From the Technicolor visions of Timothy Leary to the Technicolor machinations of Raymond Chandler, our city's song can be so serious and surreal. Drum loops of dull footsteps pacing confines of 6x8 cells at Men's Central Jail mixed with the disembodied voice of Joe Gillis narrating the story of Sunset Boulevard while floating dead in a swimming pool. Other days our city song is a raucous hip-hop crumping and locking down Hollywood Boulevard, a funky freestyle red carpet gala popping with paparazzi and Klieg light bonfires illuminating our highest selves. Let us shine. Let us shine, let us shine. Our gangsterfied and glorified city sounds revving their engines, burning rubber on asphalt, breaking all natural and supernatural speed limits, drag racing down the 10 freeway, the 5, 405, 101, and 60 to all points north, south, east, and west, from Koreatown to Croatian Place, Little Moscow to Little Ethiopia, Lake Balboa to Larchmont, Echo Park to the Palisades. Every shade in LA's urban crayon box, creating the mood, mystery, shadows, and light, harboring the living and dead, everything existing between celluloid and the flesh. All the devils and angels that are our dance partners in this manic and mystical, sadistic, and symphonic soundtrack to our modern-day LA poem noir.
Yeah. What really, really interests me about this poem is a couple of things about it. First of all, it is this kind of huge, back to your point about the canvas that is LA, it's this huge poem in terms of its scope. I almost feel at moments like I'm in a news helicopter, kind of way on top, and I can see just the whole area. So that really interested me, how sprawling it is. The other thing that really fascinates me about it is that it is really primarily an auditory poem. Most of us who go to poetry school learn about, well, you have to use great visual imagery. You have to have this. You have to use metaphor. You have to use simile. And you're relying almost entirely on sounds. So that I feel, when I'm not in the helicopter, I feel like I'm sitting in a movie theater. The movie theater that is Rich Ferguson's mind, the screen hasn't started up yet. I'm not seeing, but I'm hearing the music first.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever read a poem that does this, that it's just completely auditory. Was that a conscious decision that you made when you wrote this poem?
When I perform, when I read, I definitely rely on that sort of innate kind of sense of rhythm in my delivery,
Right.
but also my ear is kind of tuned to rhythm, so that when I write and when I go back to edit my work, I kind of edit with a musician's ear.
Right.
To hear those places where it's popping and places where it's kind of, oh, this is dead, this is clunky, you need to...
Yeah, the sound isn't
lose
working.
it. Yeah, the
You're
sound's
a sound
not working.
person.
Yeah.
That's how you're thinking, and that fascinates me because it's not how my brain works. But that's why you keep on coming back to these ideas like Our City Song. And even when you talked about the car crash just now, you talked about what you heard, not what you saw.
Right.
And that, I thought, wow, Rich, that's really kind of, that's the sense that this poet is relying on. That's the first sense that comes to you. It seems to me really, really amazing. So this was conscious. You didn't want a lot of visual imagery, but you have those kind of heroic lists. You have the freeway,
Right.
and you have those historical references. Did you have to look things up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because it's like so much of your work, it seems very freewheeling and loose, but it also feels very erudite in terms of, it's kind of a history lesson in certain ways.
A little bit, yeah.
So we're in the helicopter going through space, but we're also in the helicopter going through time.
Yes. Yeah,
Which is
I like that.
really, really, really incredible. So talk about, you left LA after the car crash. And where did you went to San Francisco after that?
After the rear-end collision, I went up to San Francisco and ended up winding up in a band for like 4 years. We toured the States a lot. It was a great experience of just being able to see the country.
Right.
And it was also a really nice experience. It was this band called Blue Movie. And they also gave me free rein to... I did a lot of singing in the band. I played drums standing up, but they also gave me a lot of free rein to do poetry. So that was kind of where I started getting into poetry performance, because sometimes I would just come out from behind my drums and just go into the crowd and rap a poem.
So you were already beginning to move into spoken
Yes.
word. And then who was it what spoken word poet was it that you heard? It was in San Francisco,
Anne
right?
Waldman.
Anne Waldman.
Yeah, I saw her perform, and to that point, I had never seen anyone perform like her. I mean, she prowled the stage like a panther. She had this energy about her. I mean, it was electric. And she wasn't reading from papers. It was just, she knew it by memory. She embodied the work, and I was just like, I want to do that.
You
and
saw her and said, this is what I want to do.
This is what I want to do. And she inspired me to like start memorizing work and just get off the book or the paper and just really just go for it.
So I guess that's what really has appealed to you about the spoken word direction, is it's a way to make the voice work like a drum, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. And I was really also just inspired by people like Patti Smith. You know, we were talking about that, and I just saw her the other night at the Wiltern, and Jim Carroll, these poets that were performers, musicians, and they just were fearless, and they just,
and sort of left it all on the stage.
Yeah.
Because that's something that you absolutely do as a performer.
Yeah.
Is just, it's all out there. So you go to San Francisco and you start kind of moving into spoken word, but then you come back to LA.
Yeah.
And how come after the terrible car crash?
Well, after like leaving LA and swearing I would never come back again, you know, and then going to London, staying in London for a couple months, going back to New Jersey, staying with my dad, playing with some poets in the East Village in the basement of an old funeral parlor. I told my dad one day, I was just like, I think I need to go back to LA and take care of some unfinished business. I think I left with my tail between my legs. I think I was a bit of a coward.
Right,
you know?
like in your poem, you know,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
is it? I'm beaten up, but I'm beaten up, but I'm not beaten, and I'm not quitting. So that's you.
Getting goosebumps, yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
And that's the one term, it's the one time that I is used in this poem.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, though there's a lot of facets. Yeah, it's the one time.
I definitely saw myself in that. That's pulled. Yeah, that was pulled from Asphalt Jungle or whatever. I saw myself in that line definitely with my relationship with LA. But I came back, and
unfinished business with LA,
Yeah.
which also sounds like double indemnity. I'm coming back, you know.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I've been here ever since. But I also just had a different mindset about it, in which I realized that.
And how was your mindset different?
Well, when I first came here, I took LA very seriously because my band in San Francisco had broken up, so I was just in this very serious mindset. And I had friends here like, you're taking LA too seriously, you know, you can't do it, you got to relax, you got to lighten up, it's going to eat you up. And I wasn't hearing them, you know, I just couldn't do it.
It's hard to do if you're from Jersey or New York.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? I take things seriously. That's how I roll.
Yeah.
That's very much an East Coast thing, I think.
But I came back, shifted my mindset, and it's, you know, there are ups and downs, but I came with a different mindset, and things just started falling into place. But I'd be curious to hear about your relationship with the East Coast, you know, how things kind of played out for you and what your evolution looked like from there to here.
Yeah, well, unlike you, I didn't have this directed, I must move to California, but California kind of played in my mind a lot, mostly because of the music I listened to. I was thinking about this after we had an earlier discussion about this, and I thought, of course, the Mamas and the Papas and California Dreaming. And that was a big deal song, and they were a big deal group. They were so different. They were so different from the Beach Boys and so different from the Beatles. They had this California thing. So that California as a place of dreams, to quote you, was already kind of circulating in my head. And then the musicians who I loved most were Southern Californians. Jim Morrison, Joni Mitchell, of course, Canadian, and Tim Buckley, of whom I was a huge fan. I saw him perform many times. And he would write, you know, walking on the beach and walking near this freeway. And it eventually dawned on me, oh, this is Southern California. This is where he is. So California really exerted a kind of a mystique on me as a teenager. And I also experienced a big poetic influence. And that was earlier. That was when I was 13 at my fancy schmancy private school on the east side. I found Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman, in our library, and I read Song of the Redwoods, which is ironically a poem about chopping the redwoods down, unfortunately. But it still, as Whitman can, just evoked the incredible majesty of these trees. And I thought, there are trees like that? Looking at the spindly little trees out on 92nd Street, thinking, there are trees like that? And I longed to see those trees. And I've seen them many times, and they never fail to just totally wow me. So I had this kind of linking already at an early age of poetic expression, freedom of poetic expression. My mother didn't like Walt Whitman. She said he does this thing called free verse, and anybody can do that. I have a poem about that in the collection, actually. And I thought, really? If he makes it look easy, isn't that a kind of genius?
Yeah.
So that was already circulating, and I applied to Berkeley for graduate school, didn't get in. So California kind of lurked on the sidelines for me for many, many years until I magically got a job at UC Riverside.
What element of helping to sustain the dream are you able to find within teaching, like either how you're able to support that dream with your students, or maybe even how they are able to give that gift back to you?
Right. Oh, that's a great question. And actually, it's a huge deal because teaching has really been incredibly important to me. I wrote my first poem when I was a little kid, and I continued to write poems. I did a little bit of writing in college. Then I went to grad school, and I wrote kind of in the margins, but my work was scholarly work for the most part. And who reignited that dream of becoming a poet? It was actually a student. I was teaching a big survey class called World Literature, and it was three different quarters. And I had a wonderful student in the class who just happened to be the editor of the creative writing magazine at UCR. Lovely guy, Mark Bedell. He came up to me after class one day and said, "Professor Hammer, do you write?" How did he know that? And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "You should submit something to Mosaic." And he was so nice about it and so welcoming, I thought, well, maybe I will submit something. And that's my first poetry publication.
Wow.
Is published in the creative writing magazine at UCR. And I kept on submitting there. And he was incredibly encouraging. So that Mark, who was my student, taught me to get over my fear of submitting work. And that's been kind of the model for my experience as a teacher. Students are so courageous. It's really hard to be a student. We've all been students. We know how scary it is. And actually it's more scary now than ever because the stakes are so high and life is so hard. But I have continually learned from students who have dared to say things, have dared to share work, have dared to ask a question.
I was hoping you could read the poem of yours, SoCal, You Are My Country.
I'd be very happy to do that. This is one of my absolute favorite poems, and this is dedicated to my daughter and my son-in-law. So this is SoCal, You Are My Country, North Hollywood, California, Lillian Barrett and Robert Murphy. SoCal, you are my country, where I worked at the bankrupt university, where I birthed books, my favorite human, an almost divorce, and at least 2 nervous breakdowns. It is too hot to live here. The allergens kill me. The drought's over only for now, but I see those 2 tall palm trees shimmering in the 100-degree temperature, waving in front of the 2 big building on Lancashire, and I feel the power pouring into me from the heat. There's songs and stories still left in me. They rise up like sweet young things strutting their stuff on Chandler and Ventura in high heels, flexing tattooed muscles, bending back barbells in a Burbank gym, dreaming of fake fights under television cameras. Those orange buses keep lumbering around the corner, and they will take me somewhere beach-like and surprising, or even hotter than this spot. It's possible. Agoura Hills, maybe, or even Pacoima. See, I'd rather burn up here alive and smoldering than dissolve in the moisture of those admittedly beautiful Pacific Northwest trees. Understand, I hate some of the people here more than I've known anywhere, but the ones I love most are also here. In Beverly Hills, Ontario, Echo Park, Venice, Riverside, Claremont, Westwood, and right here in North Hollywood, along with comic books, Nudico and informational plaques, broken down small theaters, garage bands and symphonies, and galleries showing paintings by background painters for the major studios. Funny how what they paint in their spare time, that's all backgrounds too. Like me, I'm a background poet. What's cool about being in the background is you can focus on whatever you want, like eating. I'm hungry now, and my feet tread the sizzling pavement for a pizza, and then a coffee. At Starbucks, I take a picture of 3 men who are at some studio function. They're friends. They want a memento of being all dressed up in tuxes and getting iced coffees. Smile, I say. It's balmy. And the guy in the Ray-Ban says, wow, sweetie, that's a really pretty, unusual name.
That was beautiful. I mean, you know, those orange buses keep lumbering around the corner, and they will take me somewhere beach-like, surprising, or even hotter than this spot. It's possible. Again, there's that idea of possibility.
Right.
You know?
Right. I had an incredible experience about this recently when I flew into John Wayne Airport on Wednesday. I got a car service take me to where I needed to go. Lovely young woman, very fashionable, big glasses. I took one look at her and thought, what's her story? Mm-hmm. What's her story? She's an artist who is a stand-up comic. She's got a date at the Comedy Store at the end of September. She's very excited, but she keeps on talking. She keeps on talking. She's an alumna from UC Riverside, art student, and I ask her, do you know Erica Suderberg? She was Erica's favorite student, and she's now a stand-up comic. So I immediately texted Erica, and I thought, the land of dreams. The dreamers continue to dream, even under these very difficult circumstances. This young lady is driving during the day and doing her thing at night, and it's so wonderful to find that kinship with other creatives and other dreamers, which in some ways is what that poem from City Slicker is about. Is there I am by myself, but I get to connect with the painters, and I get to connect with the guys in the tuxes.
I think that's a perfect note to end this on.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.